The sweet surprise, how my dessert became a dangerous joke gone wrong. You know those crazy mother-in-law stories you hear about? Well, buckle up, because mine tried to poison me at her own birthday party. And no, I'm not being dramatic. She literally spiked my dessert with something I'm deathly allergic to, and then had the audacity to call it a joke. I still remember the look on her face when I first met her. Becky, my lovely wife, had warned me about her mother's fiery personality, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that was about to unfold. As we arrived at the party, I could feel the tension in the air, but I tried to play it cool and focused on enjoying the celebration. The cake in all its glory sat majestically on the table, adorned with colorful flowers and an irresistible aroma that wafted through the room. That's when I spotted it. A sign on the dessert that read, "Be careful, this cake has a secret ingredient." My mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios, and I quickly excused myself to inform Becky about the potentially hazardous situation. In hindsight, I should have taken the hint and avoided the dessert altogether. But being the innocent, naive person I am, I trusted that everyone would have my best interests at heart. After all, it was her birthday party. I cautiously approached the cake, my eyes scanning the gathering for any signs of danger. That's when Alex, her oldest son, caught my eye, giving me a knowing look that seemed to say, "Don't eat it, dude." Little did I know, it was already too late. The cake had already been served, and I had taken a big bite, without any idea that my life was hanging by a thread. And that's when Becky's mother, my mother-in-law, made her infamous comment, "It's just a joke," as if the whole ordeal was some sort of twisted comedy routine. I excused myself and rushed to the bathroom, my mouth burning with an inexplicable, intense itching sensation. It became clear that I had been poisoned. My heart racing with terror, I fumbled for my epinephrine injector, desperate to save myself from a potentially lethal situation. The anxiety was palpable as I waited for the epinephrine to kick in, my mind racing with what-ifs and could-haves. Looking back, it's still hard to comprehend the severity of the situation. The thought of losing my life at a birthday party, of all places, is unbearable. I have to admit my trust and faith in her family were shaken to the core. But, in the midst of chaos, Becky was the rock that held us together. Her swift response, concern for my well-being, and gentle reassurance. It's a day that still haunts me, a day that should have been a celebration turned into a desperate fight for survival. And yes, it's a crazy story, but it's a reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, trust your instincts and prioritize your well-being above all. So, let me set the scene. I was 6 months pregnant at the time, and if any of you have been pregnant, you know that feeling when your body is basically screaming, "Let me sleep." That was me. Every single day. I was a zombie, barely keeping myself together from one minute to the next, and all I could think about was getting a good night's sleep to make it through the day. But no such luck. My mother-in-law, let's call her Karen, because of course that's her name, had been absolutely insufferable about her upcoming birthday party. She kept calling, texting, and even showing up at our house unannounced to make sure I wouldn't make excuses to skip her precious celebration. I tried to be polite, I really did. I'd answer the phone, pretend to be enthusiastic about her party, and go back to bed. But Karen wouldn't take no for an answer. She'd show up unannounced, wearing a forced smile, and expect me to be all chatty and friendly. Newsflash, Karen, I'm pregnant and exhausted. I don't have the energy to pretend to be your BFF 24/7. As the big day approached, Karen's demands only intensified. She started making veiled threats about how women should be more submissive to their in-laws, and how I was clearly not pulling my weight as her daughter-in-law. I rolled my eyes so hard they got stuck that way, but Karen just wouldn't let up. Finally, the day of the party arrived. I forced myself out of bed, with great difficulty I might add, and got the kids dressed and ready to go. Karen was taking us all to a fancy restaurant where she'd expected me to be in good spirits and excited for her big day. As we sat down to dessert, Karen leaned over and said, "Don't worry, I got your favorite," which was clearly a lie since I wouldn't dare eat her cooking. She handed me a plate with what looked like a beautiful chocolate cake, but little did I know, the party itself started like any typical family gathering. You know, those forced smiles, awkward small talk, and relatives you see once a year pretending they remember your name. But Karen, oh boy, she was on a roll that day. What's up, everyone?" I said to my dad, trying to break the awkward silence that had settled over the room. "Oh, just getting to know the new faces," he replied, his eyes scanning the room before settling on his sister, who was busy making small talk with my spouse's aunt. But Karen, oh boy, she was on a roll that day. She would lean in close to me and whisper condescending comments about how pregnancy wasn't treating me well. "Oh, sweetie, pregnancy really isn't agreeing with you, is it?" she'd say, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your face is so puffy," mimicking Karen's voice with exaggerated concern. I was trying my best to keep my hormonal rage in check, mostly by stress-eating the appetizers and avoiding eye contact with everyone. But Karen just wouldn't let up. She kept commenting on my appearance, how I was drinking too much, and how I should be careful because I didn't want to overdo it. The rest of the family seemed uncomfortable, exchanging uneasy glances and clearing their throats. My spouse tried to intervene once, but Karen brushed him off with a wave of her hand. "Oh, don't worry about it, dear," she said. "I'm just trying to help." As the day went on, I found myself getting more and more frustrated. Stress eating the appetizers wasn't working as well as it usually did, and I was starting to feel overwhelmed. I just wanted the day to be over, to escape the discomfort and awkwardness of the entire situation. But then things took a turn for the worse. I reached for what I thought was a harmless dessert, but it turned out to be something much more sinister. Allergens swirled through my mind as I took a bite, and suddenly I could feel the anxiety kicking in. Then came the moment that changed everything. Karen approached me with this sickeningly sweet smile, holding a plate with a massive slice of chocolate cake. "I made this specially for you," she said, practically shoving it into my hands. Now, I've been allergic to soy my entire life. Everyone in the family knew this. It wasn't some secret. I always carry my EpiPen, check ingredients religiously, the whole 9 yards. Why take unnecessary risks when you can avoid them altogether? I've been vigilant my whole pregnancy, carefully selecting foods and snacks, and I thought I had it down to a science. But there I was, trusting my mother-in-law because, well, who would actually try to poison their pregnant daughter-in-law? I looked up at her with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Maybe this was a genuinely thoughtful gesture, and I had simply misjudged her earlier. I took a deep breath and carefully examined the cake. I thought about the type of frosting, the ingredients, and the presentation. Something didn't seem right. Karen started to get impatient and reminded me of how eager my husband was to please her. Suddenly, everything started to click, and alarm bells began to ring. With sudden haste, I turned to the cake and felt my heart sink. Beneath the layers of chocolate and frosting, I could only assume that the moist filling was probably filled with soy products. My heart dropped. I couldn't comprehend why Karen would do this, though I began to formulate some theories in the matter of seconds. Spoiler alert, Karen would. The memory of that fateful evening is still etched vividly in my mind. It started innocently enough, a dinner invitation from my fiancé's family with a promise of home-cooked meal. I politely declined, citing previous commitments, but they insisted. The pressure was too much, and eventually, I gave in. As we sat down to eat, I noticed my mother-in-law's ambitious dessert spread. Her famous 3-tiered cake was the centerpiece, undoubtedly the crown jewel of the evening. Her confidence in her baking skills was palpable, as always. I cautiously made a decision to try a small portion of the cake. That's when disaster struck. One bite. That's all it took. Within minutes, my throat started closing up, and I was breaking out in hives. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital, hooked up to machines, with doctors telling me how lucky I was that the ambulance arrived so quickly. The lab tests confirmed it. The cake was absolutely loaded with soy protein. This wasn't cross-contamination. This was intentional. It sent shockwaves through the entire family. The severity of my reaction clearly wasn't just a coincidence. In hindsight, the warning signs were there. The knowing smirk on my mother-in-law's face, the way she hastily excused herself after serving dessert, these were all subtle omens of a prank gone wrong. And yet, I was taken in by her manipulative behavior. My fiancé was shell-shocked, struggling to come to terms with his mother's reckless actions. He couldn't fathom why she'd do something so heartless. The more pressing question, however, was why my mother-in-law thought her joke was funny. What kind of sick, twisted humor condones putting someone's life at risk? We were forced to reevaluate our relationships and ask some tough questions about trust, responsibility, and respect within the family. It's been a long and arduous process, one that's tested the limits of our marriage and forced us to grow together. But above all, I'm grateful to have made it through this night, scarred but alive. When I confronted Karen, her response was something straight out of a bad movie. She actually laughed and said, "Oh, honey, I just wanted to prove you were being dramatic about your allergy. Besides, you were stealing all the attention with your pregnancy." At first, I thought maybe I had misinterpreted the situation. Maybe she was trying to be a humorous mother-in-law. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that her actions were not just playful. They were reckless. She had taken a potentially deadly gamble with my health and the well-being of my unborn baby. The thought sent a chill down my spine. How could she be so callous and irresponsible? I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Karen might be keeping from our family. Were there other instances like this, where she prioritized her own selfish desires over the safety and well-being of others? As I struggled to process this shocking revelation, I couldn't help but think about the millions of people who live with severe food allergies. For them, a seemingly harmless dessert can turn into a life-threatening emergency in a split second. And for me, it wasn't just about the food. It was about the person who served it to me with a smile. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Karen's actions weren't just hurtful. They were also profoundly damaging to our relationship. How could I ever trust her again, knowing that she was capable of putting my health at risk for her own twisted sense of humor? The aftermath of this ordeal would take a long time to repair, and it would never be the same again. I did what any sane person would do. I called the police. Turns out, intentionally poisoning someone is, surprise, surprise, super illegal. Karen was arrested right there in her designer pantsuit, still insisting it was just a harmless prank. The charges? Aggravated assault and intentional endangerment. Not so funny now, is it, Karen? I mean, what's next? Putting rat poison in my coffee? It's not like I'm asking for much, just a little respect for human life. As I sat in the waiting room, trying to process the events that had unfolded, I couldn't help but think about the countless hours I'd spent listening to Karen's apologetic yet insincere excuses for her various mishaps. Oh, it was just a mistake, or I didn't mean to, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me tell you, Karen, when it comes to poisoning someone's dessert, there's no such thing as an accident. It's intentional, it's malicious, and it's downright cruel. And you know what? You're going to have to face the consequences of your actions. The courtroom was packed when Karen finally made her appearance. I could feel the weight of the judge's gaze as he looked over the evidence against her. Intentional endangerment is no laughing matter, and I was relieved when the verdict came in, guilty on both counts. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but think about the long road ahead of her. Rehab, therapy, and maybe even some time in prison. The possibilities were endless. But you know what? I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the wake-up call Karen needed to finally realize that her actions had consequences. And to the rest of the family, let this be a lesson. If you're going to pull a stunt like this, don't bother trying to weasel your way out of it. Just own up to it, take responsibility, and try to make things right. Anything less, and you're just going to end up like Karen, behind bars, trying to explain to a judge why you thought poisoning someone's dessert was a good idea. Not exactly the most impressive defense. But here's where it gets even better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, my protector, the father of my unborn child, actually defended his mother. I was shocked, even though I should have known better by now. The way she would drop hints and make snide comments about me to him behind my back. She didn't mean any harm, he said. You're overreacting, he said. It's just how she shows love, he said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emotional reasoning is a flag that I see now that my husband was using to silence me. He always said I was being too sensitive, that I needed to lighten up. But I knew what his mother had done was not just a joke. I had been diagnosed with food allergies since I was a teenager, and anaphylactic shock is no laughing matter. I carry an EpiPen with me at all times, and I've had to use it more times than I can count. The thought of his mother tampering with my dessert made my blood boil. Yeah, nothing says love quite like anaphylactic shock, right? I snapped, trying to keep my anger in check. My husband looked taken aback, but still, he refused to see his mother's actions for what they were. I realized then that I had to protect myself and our unborn child from his mother's manipulation and neglect. It was a turning point in our relationship, one that made me question everything. Was my husband going to stand up for me, or would he continue to defend his mother's toxic behavior? I knew that I deserved better than a partner who would question my judgment and downplay his mother's hurtful actions. The consequences of defending his mother only made me stronger and more determined to take control of my life and our family's future. It took me exactly 3 days to file for divorce. 3 days of listening to him defend his mother's actions, 3 days of gaslighting, 3 days of realizing I was married to a mama's boy who would never put his wife and child first. The memory of those days still haunts me. He'd tell me I was overreacting, that it was just a joke. But I knew better. I knew the devastating consequences of eating food with an allergen. The panic, the fear, the uncertainty of not knowing whether I'd made a severe mistake. The divorce was actually pretty quick. My ex was so busy supporting his precious mommy through her legal troubles that he barely fought it. He even signed away his parental rights. I guess defending attempted murder is a full-time job. I have to admit it was quite a relief to be free from the toxic relationship. But it's a relief that's bittersweet, knowing that our daughter will grow up without the love and support of both parents. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, I began to heal. I started to focus on myself and my daughter's well-being. I took up new hobbies, started volunteering at a local charity, and even began pursuing my passion for painting. It's funny how a toxic relationship can take over every aspect of your life, but it's also amazing how it can thrust you into a new chapter of growth and self-discovery. I'm grateful for the experience, hard as it was to endure. It taught me to prioritize myself and my loved ones above all else. And though my ex still claims he's the victim, I know the truth. He's still out there, supporting his mother's endeavors. It's while I'm here, rebuilding a better life for myself and my child. So here I am now, living with my amazing parents, raising my beautiful baby girl, and finally able to eat dessert without fear of ending up in the ER. It's funny how fast you appreciate the little things in life. Karen, my ex-mother-in-law, got 8 months in jail, had to pay a hefty fine, and cover all my medical expenses. But that's a story for another time. The moral of this story? Always trust your instincts. Never eat anything from someone who clearly hates you, and remember, sometimes the trash takes itself out. I mean, you'd think that would be a lesson, learned, but apparently not for Karen. Oh well, at least I got to keep all the birthday presents, and I'm not talking about the ones that were nice and somewhat worth keeping. I'm talking about the gift cards and the silly figurines. Let me tell you, it was a tough spot to be in. My ex-husband and I were living with his parents at the time, and I was already feeling a bit claustrophobic. But I tried to make the best of it and be nice to everyone. That's why this whole ordeal was so shocking. I mean, who secretly laces their daughter-in-law's dessert with an allergen and claims it's just a joke? Karen certainly knew how to throw a joke. All right. Anyway, after I finally severed ties with Karen and started fresh, I realized that there's a lot to be said for living life on your own terms. And that includes eating desserts as dessert-deserving as they come, without worrying about ending up in the ER with an anaphylactic shock. And let me tell you, it feels amazing. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who can just eat anything, but when I do indulge in a sweet treat, I want it to be worth it. Smiling directly at the camera, I said, "The moral of this story? Always trust your instincts. Never eat anything from someone who clearly hates you. And remember, sometimes the trash takes itself out." Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, I did get to keep all the birthday presents. I paused for comedic effect, and then winked at the camera, adding, Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about my crazy ex family. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from.